Despite having multiple lists of things I'd like to eventually make, I had no idea what to make for today's video. But then, while staring head emptily at one of my dioramas, I found this. What the heck is it? Let's ask Google Translate. Alright, so immediately after the start space, it says, buy a potato face for 100 potatoes. What does that even mean? Here in the bottom left it says, get 500 potatoes with your first potato harvest. Let's all sing together. Okay. And my personal favorite, cows invade the neighboring farm. They eat the potatoes, lose 100 potatoes. Look at that adorable little cow. I would let him have 100 potatoes, no questions asked. Anyways, I don't know how accurate these translations are, but they're all amazing, and I absolutely need to make something with this. While I was trying to brainstorm what to do with this ridiculous board game, my daughter asked me if I was going to make any more comics with my Tasty 8 original characters. And I didn't realize until then that it's been over a year since I made a comic with them. But let's back up a little bit. Who exactly are the Tasty 8? These are the Tasty 8. They're my original Cookie Dude heroes that I created 2 years ago. Their names are AP, Sandie, Uni, Guy, Mac, Cam, Quin, and Chewy. Each character brings their own unique set of skills and personalities to the team, which makes storytelling with them super fun. Since their creation, they've gone on various adventures, including taking down this horrifying cookie monster jack-o'-lantern, and helping these gimmighools find a new home. Since my Tasty 8 photography is often dependent on them talking to each other in a comic strip style format, my next step is to come up with a fun story or amusing situation to put them in. And our ridiculous little board game makes for the perfect scenario for my Cookie Dudes to shine. Now that I have my very vague board game story idea, I get started on my draft diorama setup of Yotsuba here and the Tasty 8. This allows me to start deciding where everyone should be placed for optimal visibility and effective storytelling. Doing a draft setup like this will also often help me come up with even more ideas to flesh out the details of my comic and who will be saying what. I guess you can call this the role-playing stage of my process, where I pretend to be Yotsuba, deciding what each character would do and say in this situation. And the fact that each of my Tasty 8 characters has a very unique personality really helps me come up with their dialogue, because all I need to do is imagine what each of them would think or feel in any given situation. Cam, who Yotsuba is holding here, will be introducing the board game to us, and Mac will be reading the rules of the board game. Since he's the most long-winded of the Tasty 8, I felt that role would fit his personality perfectly. And our players today will be Chewy, Quin, and resident shy guy Uni. Once I have everything set up more or less the way I want, I then take some quick test photos to get an idea of what kind of photo compositions I can reasonably get, so I can begin drafting my comic panels and speech bubbles. And for my second draft setup, since I want my Yotsuba to be posed like this for one of the comic panels, I have to figure out how to make that happen, because her figure is ridiculously top-heavy, and she won't just magically balance that way without support and/or sticky tack. I also need to swap out her sitting shorts with these standing shorts, and replace one of her straight legs with this bent leg so that her pose looks more natural. I put Cam in her hand and then try my best to get Yotsuba posed naturally, which you can't see at all from this angle, so here's a better angle. With a nice little wad of ticky tack on her bent leg, Yotsuba surprisingly stayed in place without any additional support. And this setup resulted in my favorite photo of today's entire comic, this one right here. Alright, now that I have a general setup idea and some test photos to work with, I drafted some quick sketches of my comic. You might recognize some of these from the test photos I took, like my favorite one right here. And some more you might not have seen yet, but don't read ahead, jeez. Anyways, I also drew here in the margins the faces and poses of my Tasty 8 characters that I'll be making out of clay today. And I've got 2 more pages of panels here, but I don't want to spoil it obviously, so you don't get to see those yet. Despite having dozens of iterations of my Tasty 8 dudes already completed, I'll be making a few more of them today, just so I can have them in poses that are more appropriate for my board game comic. Plus, they're really fun to make, so let's hop to it. I've got my Cookie Dude molds here, which you may have seen in my Tasty 8 Halloween video. And I've got my Tasty 8 dough, which is mostly Sculpey clay with a bit of Cos clay added in for flexibility. I get started by filling my Cookie Dude molds with clay and texturing the backs of them with some sandpaper. Once I have a few of them ready, I pop them in the freezer so that they're easier to remove from the molds. With my Cookie Dudes thoroughly chilled, I pop them out of their molds and bend them into their final poses. This one's gonna be Cam, who's excitedly telling us we'll be playing Potato Panic. This will also be another one of Cam, who will have her hands together in her best attempt at a serious and professional pose. And since Mac here will be reading to us today, His hands need to be posed to hold an eensy-weensy little book. After taking some test photos of Cam with this Mini Brands Transformer toy, I thought it would be super cute to pose her actually sitting on its shoulders. So that's what I'm doing here. Oh my goodness, I love it already. While I pop these guys in the oven, I pose a few more cookie dudes, bake them, and sand their rough edges so I can move on to their chalk pastel baths. But first, I want to show you how I made this microscopic little book that Mac will be reading from. I have this cute little paper that came with one of my miniature toys, and the print size seemed perfect for this. So I trimmed a rectangle off of it to make this almost impossible to open little book. And let's check to make sure it looks good in Mac's hands. Alright, chalk bath time. I gently coat these guys with a watered down cream colored chalk pastel. After letting them dry for a bit, they get their final tan chalk pastel bath. I bring out my Tasty 8 parts bag so I can get started trimming some eyebrows for Mac and Cam. I have some reference eyebrows here as well, so I know how tiny they need to be trimmed. And 5 minutes later, we've got most of the eyebrows we need. In addition to her prominent black eyebrows, Cam's primary unique feature is her bright red shirt. So I paint those on with some red liquid clay. Next, my Cams get their beautiful black eyebrows, as well as their variety of facial expressions. Fun fact, Cam's personality is based on my daughter's, so she loves to play games, tell stories, and especially enjoys telling jokes. My daughter also often starts her jokes by telling us, "I have a joke," which I absolutely love. Next up are Mac's frosting details, starting with the red heart on his chest, which is symbolic of his role as the team's medic. Since Mac is one of the few members of the Tasty 8 that has a very well-defined role, I thought it would be cool to visually indicate that on his body with a heart icon. And since he's the old man of the group, I thought some big white eyebrows and matching white eyes would look really nice on him. Just like Cam and the rest of the Tasty 8, Mac gets some candy red lips, which are traditional for gingerbread men designs. But let me make one thing clear, the Tasty 8 are not gingerbread men. They are snickerdoodle dudes. There's a huge difference between these two groups of cookie people, and I still have some lore to flesh out regarding the socio-cultural dynamics between them, so stay tuned for that. Next, I add some white frosting on Mac's right arm and right leg, which, lore-wise, acts as the glue between his main body and his prosthetic limbs. Lastly, I paint on his brown prosthetic leg and arm. The story behind this is that any snickerdoodle person that wants to make a child needs to give up 2 of their original limbs and replace them with chocolate prosthetics. Mac decided to go with the decadent dark chocolate prosthetics because he thought they were the classiest option. And the final painting step for my Tasty 8 dudes is toasting their backs with some honey brown paint. This is the little toy die that came with my miniature board game. The little pips are actually a sticker that wraps around the entire thing, and it constantly peels off. So I want to remake it out of clay and make it a little bit smaller in the process. So I'm going to use one of my baked clay pieces to cut out a little die shape. And that's not going to work. So I decide to make one from scratch, starting with a cylinder of white clay that I flatten out the sides of with this larger unpipped die. After baking my rectangular prism, I trim off a little piece of it. And after sanding it, it's dicey enough. Before our snack time, let's add the finishing touches on our Cams and Macs. This is just some matte Mod Podge, which actually makes their frosting details look more shiny and tasty. But not as tasty as these English muffin pizzas. This is where I make all my speech bubbles for my comics. This is Inkscape. Inkscape is a free, easy-to-use drawing program for making clean, smooth images. It's great for creating things like logos, signs, or even stickers. For me, the coolest part about Inkscape is that you can resize anything you make here without it getting blurry. It's so awesome, and I highly recommend trying it out. Here are some speech bubbles I've already made for my Tasty 8 dudes in the past, as well as their unique fonts so that I don't forget them the next time I want to do a Tasty 8 comic. In this case, it's been a year since I've made one, so I'm super grateful that I have these saved in one neat file. So let's go ahead and make a speech bubble together. I start by pasting in the image I want to make a speech bubble for, so that I can plan out the size and placement of the bubble properly. Here I've got 2 speech bubbles already completed, so you can see what that looks like. For my new speech bubble, I select the rectangle tool here from my toolbox, and I slide this little node in the corner of the rectangle to round the edges. Next, I copy one of my completed speech bubbles, select my rounded rectangle, and paste the style of the completed bubble into it. Next, I place my bubble on top of my image and copy over my previous text so that I keep Cam's font consistent. Once I've decided on the words I want for the speech bubble and how I want them to be formatted, I resize my speech bubble around them. And since I can't change the shape of the rectangle box as is, I go up here to Object, Path, and I click Object to Path. That allows me to add 3 nodes here and transform this rectangle into a proper speech bubble. After doing that about a dozen more times, it's time for our comic's debut.